Hello there, so click the circles to the beat. The premise behind Osu is overly simple, and so a spreading concern is that after the game's 10-year lifespan, there's no way to create new or interesting maps. Like, there's only so many ways to place simple circles and sliders, right? Especially when accounting for the limitations of music. While I can understand how these complaints come about, I don't think I can agree with them. Not now, nor anytime in the near future. To explain why, let's talk a bit about Osu's official mapping contests. Just like Osu itself, they're usually pretty simple. Mappers are given a song and the task of creating the highest quality spread of difficulties they can. Entries are anonymously sent over to a panel of judges who look through and evaluate them in 5 different categories. With scores from each judge added together, mappers with the total highest scoring entries are given prizes of some kind. These prizes can change slightly between contests, but usually the top 3 mappers receive some amount of supporter, while the grand prize winner receives the Elite Mapper title and the ability to bundle their map with the game's initial download. I'm sure you know iconic new player maps like Tear Rain or My Love already. Both of these were winners of official beat mapping contests. So these are a nice way to expose new players to good maps and to give mappers credit for their well-designed work. Sounds cool, but not everyone appreciates this kind of contest, mostly because of what it really takes to win. While these maps are the most well-designed according to judges, they're arguably not that interesting. They're simple, clean, and safe, and that simplicity is intensified by the boring song choice of each contest. Maps designed with innovative ideas aren't universally appreciated by mappers, and so they never receive high enough scores from each judge to win first place. Okay, considering how bundled maps teach players the fundamentals of the game, boring maps might be a good thing here, but that's beside the point. Mappers are often uninterested in mapping contests because they promote only the most simple and uninteresting maps. In what looked like opposition to this mindset, however, a new type of mapping contest was introduced: Aspire. This was a big fuck you to conventional mapping. It first launched in mid-2014 with an intense song to map and a premise that completely derailed from the idea of ordinary mapping contests. Aside from being humanly playable, there were no restrictions for Aspire entries. The ranking criteria? Irrelevant. Safe mapping? Worthless. Creativity, innovation, new ideas, those were what mattered for Aspire. It went beyond the ordinary. I like to think this first Aspire contest was an experiment to gauge interest of sorts, and a successful one at that. With more than double the amount of entries compared to previous mapping contests, Aspire proved how attractive unconventional mapping could be, both to players and mappers. While it may seem completely different in tone, Aspire was still a mapping contest, and so it functioned as one. Like previous mapping contests, a panel of judges scored each anonymous submission based on these same categories. But for Aspire specifically, some things were changed. Spread was no longer relevant since each entry was just one difficulty, and 2 more judges were added to boost the value of creativity, which ultimately led to this map's win. Charles 445's submission here pushed the informally established limits of 2014 mapping in a number of ways. Slider velocity changes, spacing, and rhythms used here were intensified beyond what you'd ever see in a ranked map. It also went to the next level with its slider body manipulation and reading concepts, while at the same time uniquely following the background video with its object placement. To quote one of the judges, "This is creative. This is what we were looking for when we started this contest." As a prize, this fundamentally unrankable map was actually moved to the ranked category, where it could boast as a truly stand-out winner of a mapping contest, the exact opposite of generic stuff like Tear Rain or My Love. Considering how popular Aspire was, it's surprising to think that it wasn't held again until mid-2016. 2 years had passed, and mapping changed considerably over that time. Ranking requirements became less strict due to steady changes in the nominator system, and ranked maps clearly reflected that. Some of what mappers considered absurd in the winning Aspire entry were now found in ranked maps. Slider velocity changes on nearly every object, 1/4 jumps at a relatively high BPM, overall chaotic spacing changes, all of these were somehow moving towards the mainstream, when just 2 years ago, they were only associated with a mapping contest featuring intentionally unrankable map design. Since the limits of mapping pushed further towards their edges now, the second Aspire contest set higher expectations for everyone involved. Anything like Charles's 2014 submission wouldn't be special anymore, so mappers were required to innovate beyond the established ideas of 2016 mapping. Not exactly an easy thing to do. Yet somehow, those high expectations were surpassed. Monstrata's entry here took the premise of Aspire, unrestricted mapping, to a degree that hadn't yet been explored. While it did utilize a lot of unrankable 2-button rhythms, slider path manipulation, and unheard of source file edits, those were only secondary to the map's main gimmick. The thing that actually made it stand out from other entries. Its slider animations. The first of these appears early on, a star that expands and brightens over the course of 2 seconds. This introduces the idea of sliders expressing a continuous set of images, as well as how they can be humanly played. Even though similar ideas can be found in other maps, the star alone was enough to surprise people. Nobody had ever used sliders quite like this, and it was definitely executed well here. But the second slider animation is what I think caused this entry to win by as much as it did. Instead of only making some cool shapes again, slider animations were used to express an idea. Starting from what looks like just a really weird slider, something appears and expands to form a butterfly. It becomes clear that the weird slider was just a cocoon from which hatched this. The first few times I looked at this, it sent chills down my spine. It was something I hadn't seen before. This was creative. This was exactly what I was looking for when I heard about this contest. It could have been too good. Flash forward to 2017 now. It was announced that this year would feature more mapping contests than ever before, and as anyone would have guessed, one of those was the next Aspire. This time though, people were a bit skeptical. The song choice wasn't as rhythmically interesting as it was in previous contests. It was relatively repetitive, and that was only hurt more by it being 3 times longer. Less mappers were motivated to participate, and combining that with the even higher expectations set from the last contest, Aspire wasn't looking too good. Most submissions this time around utilized ideas which were no longer very special, like ordinary 2-button gameplay. While it may be different from ranked maps, I've seen it done the same way in almost every Aspire entry. There's also stuff like misleading slider manipulation. Again, I've seen these since Charles's map. The way they're used here isn't really bringing anything new to the table. And now, even basic slider animations have become common. They were cool when I first saw them and they did something actually special with the idea, but now they're just yet another part of the Build Your Own Aspire map kit. In the way that they're used here, they're not new. They're not interesting anymore. However, even with all these obstacles in place, mappers still found room for innovation. This entry, which received the most praise out of all the entries so far, uses some game-breaking glitch to make sliders behave irregularly. They appear completely distorted, and the map attempts a few interesting ways to implement them while associating them with the music. The map also has a bunch of other complex gimmicks and an extremely clean design, all of which I appreciate, but what really makes this map stand out above all the other entries is its slider distortion. Relative to all concurrent and past entries, it's a new idea, which is what I, and probably a lot of other people, find most valuable in the Aspire mapping contest. What about the next Aspire contest though? Some people are worried that there's no more room for unique mapping in Aspire. Everything's been done already. But I don't really think that's true. While this map did utilize a special way of distorting sliders, the concept still hasn't been explored as much as it could be. Imagine if Monstrata's Aspire map only included the star, but didn't go as far as to include the butterfly. One was cool, but because of how it was presented, the second one actually sent a chill down my spine. These distortions were cool, but there's room for using them in a more interesting way. What we see here is only the surface of their potential. If I were to make some predictions, I'd say the next Aspire contest will feature a bunch of maps using the slider distortion technique in ways similar to this. Just like slider animations in this contest, they won't be all that special anymore because they're not used in a new or interesting way. However, maybe one entry will use distortions in a completely new way, breaking beyond the surface. Or better yet, maybe one entry will use an idea that still hasn't been discovered. Just as we've seen in each new Aspire contest, it feels like the limit has already been reached, but in spite of the game's limitations, there's always room to innovate. I feel a similar idea can be applied to rankable maps as well. Even though they are more restrictive, what's acceptable in modern mapping has evolved alongside the changes seen in Aspire maps. Some of what was considered absurd in 2014 can be found in quite a few recently ranked maps, and so ranked maps arguably have room for innovation as well. That only accounts for pushing the limits of rankability though. Rankable maps can interest me without pushing those limits, by expanding on ideas just as we've seen in Aspire. For example, this map's gimmick is a pun. The song is titled Distance, and the whole map is designed around scaling distances between objects. Sounds really simple, but it does find a decent amount of ways to use this gimmick, and does so in an organized and easily rankable way. After 10 years of ranked maps, I haven't seen another map express the same idea as clearly and effectively as this one. It's an idea that could have been expressed in any map at any time, yet nobody's been able to expand on its potential so well until now. This is just like slider animations in the second Aspire. While the star was cool, we've sorta seen it before. The butterfly, on the other hand, interested me because it explored the idea's potential even more. Pushing the limits of rankability isn't what makes maps necessarily interesting to me, but rather how they can express ideas I haven't fully experienced before. Complex maps can interest me just as much as simple ones. Anyway, that's why I think the argument saying there's only so many ways to play circles and sliders doesn't really hold up. There's always more ideas and more potential to explore. Moving back to Aspire though, I should probably mention that voting for the most recent Aspire contest is currently ongoing. If you're interested in seeing how mappers push the limits of the game, check out the 12 entries here. Instead of normal judging this time, the winner will be decided through community voting, which anyone can participate in. You've got 3 votes, and there's definitely some choices here which do stand out above others. But yeah, thanks to these guys for supporting this video, and I'll see you next week.